Say it again, sorry.
Iran, North Korea.
No dissent?
I might if I have time at the end.
Gotcha.
I'll let you know. Actually, I'm probably gonna sit. Okay. Everyone ready? Shoulda cut updates after Emory. Pat, he has conceded the Phillips evidence on the Iran scenario that indicates that Iran is not only interested solely in nuclear power, they tested materials to trigger nuclear explosion. It's from April 2nd. It was the most recent on this question, which means the Iran scenario is going to come first. His probability impacts on North Korea are not false. He has conceded the Western intelligence agencies uncovered Iranian documents indicating that scientists tested a neutron initiator and that this is what they use to launch a nuclear weapon and has no peaceful application, which means that if I win that we stop Iran, that's going to come first. He has conceded the second Phillips evidence and indicates the U.S. should not solely rely on the international community. All of his evidence assumes a world in which we use UN Security Council sanctions. That's why he's reading evidence that Russia and China would not support, but that is not the negative advocacy. He has conceded the solvency evidence on this question, which indicates that the only possible way of stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is by imposing quick, strong energy sanctions. This means going around the UN. Congress and the House have passed the Iran Sanctions Petroleum Act and other legislation which would impose similar penalties on companies that export gasoline and other refined petroleums. He has also conceded the solvency on this question. The Business Week argument, his only response is this doesn't mean that it's enough to stop them, but first I'd say he's conceded the Russian oil producer is the one with the most overseas assets in Iran, and they abandoned work in Iran because of threat of U.S. sanctions. Lukoil took a $63 million impairment loss, and the threat of sanctions is causing other nations to withdraw their policies and insurance companies because they fear that they will be implicated in the sanctions regime. Also, his arguments about how the regime collapse is inevitable in status quo, but sanctions strengthen them, assumes he is winning solvency, but my argument is that sanctions would allow us to either cede power from the regime or overthrow the regime, because he has conceded the Doublewitz evidence, which indicates that the Iranian people blame Ahmadinejad for the economic problems, which is a direct turn to that argument, because it indicates that because that they blame them for the economic problems, if we use sanctions and that increase the economic problems of the country, that would only anger the people even more and cause them to want to overthrow the regime. The evidence is great on this question, and is specific to my advocacy. Something Pat's answers are not. He has conceded the energy sanctions are designed to weaken the Revolutionary Guard and feed the flames of discontent. I don't know what what specificities Pat wants more than that. It's specific to the Revolutionary Guard. It says that it is flaming discontent because of the way that they have treated the economy. If we use economic sanctions, that only furthers the discontent and causes them to want to overthrow the regime. The other thing is my evidence is much better than Pat's on this question because it indicates the incentive behind overthrowing the regime. It indicates that they are not happy with the way that Ahmadinejad has promised to alleviate economic woes but are no longer doing so. Sanctions only further that. So, Pat's arguments and extensions are not sufficient to answer the Iran evidence. He's conceded it outweighs on a probability because they've already tested these nuclear weapons initiators, and it only leads to anger them even more. So the Iran issue is clearly goes affirmative. Now let's go to the North Korea issue. The first problem is that my Carpenter evidence does not conclude affirmative. It indicates that the Kim Jong-il saying that he is going to give up nuclear materials is a blatant lie. His argument about how it doesn't talk about sanctions is irrelevant because my argument questions the incentive behind the reason why Kim Jong-il wants to have nuclear weapons. It recognizes it as legitimacy. You can I'll read the rest of the Carpenter card as an extension to this argument. It says it is not enough to get North Korea to promise to abide by the agreed framework of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. North Korea has demonstrated repeatedly that its word means nothing. There must be intrusive, on-demand inspections of all known and suspected North Korean nuclear facilities. The odds are not good that North Korea will agree to a new framework that includes rigorous inspections as opposed to toothless, updated version of the agreed framework. My argument is that Kim Jong-il recognizes sanctions are key to his legitimacy, and so he has no incentive to give them up. It's not a question of recency. It's a question of it's a question of incentive for Kim Jong-il. He has no evidence on this question as to why Kim Jong-il would be incentivized to give up nuclear weapons. His evidence is terrible on this question. It just says that they would come back and start talking. My evidence speaks to the conclusion of those talks and says that they would not give up nuclear materials, which means there's no possible neg offense on this question, but he's also conceded offense on this question, which is much better than Pat gives credit. It indicates that sanctions are working now. North Korea is running out of food and must disarm to get aid. You can extend the Kim evidence says North Korea is expected to suffer from a food shortage more than 1 million tons, and North Korea is under growing pressure to return to a dialogue with regional powers where it can win large-scale economic aid in return for steps to end its nuclear program. The argument is that sanctions imposed after North Korea's nuclear tests have cut off lucrative arms sales, and many in its trading companies have blacklisted and put under intense scrutiny, squeezing the flow of hard currency to its reclusive state. It's not a question of does Kim Jong-il like his citizens. It's a question of does he have the capability to maintain or quash the dissent in a world where we are cutting off food aid. My evidence conclusively decides no. The only way that they are able to prevent the dissent is if they come to the table because of sanctions, and as a result of sanctions that they would come to the table. But he's also conceded the second turn on this question that indicates that sanctions are working now. The department that gives favor to key party leaders like Kim Jong-il needed to keep the elites in line is currently in chaos. This is a direct response to his argument. It's not a question of dialogue and opening trade. My argument is that we need to use sanctions. Pat's going to say we need to use dialogue or else they'll attack us. My argument is it doesn't matter if they attack us if they don't have nuclear weapons. Them attacking us is a reason why we should use sanctions, because that would prevent them from attacking us with nuclear weapons. But also my evidence indicates that no, they would be unable to attack us because we have put them in a state of such insecurity, and they are unable to attack us because they do not have the necessary resources. That's the NASA evidence, which indicates that an expert on North Korea said that money generated by the Bureau is a very useful tool to control high-ranking officials in the party, and that some of the money generated by Room 39 is used to buy the loyalty of senior party officials, and that sanctions are very, very effective because the regime is tottering on the brink of collapse. It talks about how because the regime is on the brink of collapse, we should use economic sanctions to overthrow the regime. So here's how the round breaks down. Iran comes first because Pat has conceded evidence that they have already tested nuclear materials and the weapons initiator. It is the most recent evidence on this question. I'm conclusively winning the Iran debate because he has conceded the new sanctions that the U.S. implements would solve, and he's conceding impact defense on the North Korea scenario. So at worst, you don't evaluate that.
I had 24 seconds left. Can I see the? Sorry.